Not dramatically, I didn't throw it or drop it in shock. It just slipped. Like everything else in my life was slipping away in that crystalline moment when my husband Daniel stood up at our anniversary dinner, tapped his fork against his glass, and smiled that charming smile I'd fallen in love with 12 years ago. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate Brittany and my 5th wedding anniversary," he began, his voice carrying across the private dining room of La Bernardine. Faces turned toward us, his family, my family, our closest friends. The golden light from the chandeliers caught the silver in his hair, making him look distinguished, successful, the perfect husband. "But I have an announcement to make." His eyes found mine across the table, and for a heartbeat I thought he might surprise me with something wonderful. A vacation. A renewal of our vows. The adoption we'd discussed that he didn't show interest in anymore. Something to make up for the distance that had grown between us like a cancer. Instead, he looked toward the corner of the room where Lydia sat. His secretary. 26 years old, with honey blonde hair and the kind of curves that my 34-year-old body had never possessed. She was glowing, literally glowing with that radiance everyone talks about. "Lydia is 7 months pregnant," Daniel announced, his voice steady and proud. "And I'm the father." The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the soft jazz playing in the background, the clink of silverware from the main dining room, my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. Someone gasped. My sister Carmen, I think. My mother's fork clattered against her plate. But Daniel wasn't finished. He cleared his throat, straightened his shoulders, and looked directly at me. "I'm sorry, Brittany, but we both know this marriage hasn't been working. You can't give me what I need, what we need. A family." His voice took on that reasonable tone he used in business meetings. "I've tried to be patient, but I can't wait forever for something that's never going to happen. So Lydia is going to move in and stay with us." My mother-in-law, Mrs. Grant, nodded approvingly from her seat beside him. "Daniel's right, dear," she said, her voice carrying that familiar edge of disapproval. "You've had 5 years. 5 years and not even a miscarriage to show for it. We can't keep waiting for a barren woman to give us grandchildren." The word barren hit me like a physical blow. Around the table, faces stared at me with a mixture of shock, pity, and uncomfortable curiosity. Some looked away. Others leaned forward, hungry for my reaction. I felt Maya's hand reach for mine under the table, felt the collective intake of breath from our friends, felt the weight of pity and shock pressing down on me from every direction. But I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the remains of my shattered glass at his smug face. I stood up slowly, placed my napkin beside my untouched plate, and picked up my purse. Every eye in the room followed my movements as I walked to the door, my heels clicking against the marble floor with measured precision. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I didn't scream or throw wine in his face or slap him across his smug, self-satisfied expression. I simply walked away. Behind me, I heard Lydia's triumphant laugh and Daniel's voice saying, "Well, that went better than expected." I walked out of that restaurant and into the cold October night, leaving behind the life I thought I knew and the man I thought I loved. What Daniel didn't know was that his betrayal had just set in motion a chain of events that would leave him with nothing but regrets and the bitter taste of his own arrogance. Before we continue, please write in the comment which country you are watching this video. We love knowing where our global family is tuning in from. And if this is your first time on this channel, please subscribe. Your support helps us bring even more epic revenge tales of life. Enjoy listening. My name is Brittany Reyes Grant, though I suppose I should say was. I'm 32 years old, and until that night I believed I was living a fairy tale. 5 years ago I married Daniel Grant thinking I'd found my forever. He was everything I thought I wanted. Successful, charming, from a prominent family. I was a naive 27-year-old architect who'd just landed my dream job at Santiago and Associates. Daniel was the dashing lawyer who swept me off my feet with expensive dinners and weekend getaways. Our wedding was perfect. I wore my grandmother's pearls and a dress that cost more than my car. Daniel looked at me like I was the only woman in the world. His mother even managed a smile that day, though I should have noticed how quickly it faded during the reception. The first 2 years of marriage were blissful, or at least I thought they were. We bought the beautiful Victorian house on Birchwood Street, though the deed went into my name alone since I had the better credit score and the larger down payment from my trust fund. Daniel insisted we keep our finances separate for tax purposes, he said. I was too in love to question it. Year 3 brought the pressure. Mrs. Grant's pointed questions about grandchildren at every family dinner. Daniel's increasingly urgent discussions about starting our family. My own excitement about becoming a mother. About creating the warm, loving home I'd always dreamed of. Year 4 brought the doctors. The procedures. The mounting medical bills that I paid from my own accounts while Daniel complained about the cost. The devastating news that my chances of conceiving naturally were slim. The recommendation for expensive fertility treatments that Daniel grudgingly agreed to try once or twice. Year 5 brought the distance. Daniel working late more often. His phone buzzing at all hours. His new secretary Lydia with her knowing smiles and the way she touched his arm during office parties. The growing coldness in our bed. The way he flinched when I reached for his hand. I threw myself into my work, designing beautiful homes for other families while my own dreams crumbled. I won awards, earned promotions, built a reputation as one of the city's most sought-after residential architects. I told myself that if I couldn't have children, at least I could have a career that mattered. But late at night, when Daniel pretended to sleep beside me, I would stare at the ceiling of our bedroom and wonder if I was enough. If I would ever be enough. I should have seen the signs. The mysterious phone calls. The sudden interest in his appearance. The way he started criticizing everything about me. My clothes, my cooking, my inability to give him what he wanted most. Maya tried to warn me. My best friend since college, my maid of honor, my voice of reason when I couldn't hear my own thoughts clearly. She would invite me for coffee and gently probe about my marriage, about Daniel's late nights, about the growing shadows under my eyes. "Brittany," she said just last month, "you know you can talk to me about anything, right? If something's wrong." But I cut her off. I defended him. I made excuses. I chose loyalty over truth because I couldn't face the possibility that my perfect life was built on lies. Now, walking through the front door of the house that had been my sanctuary, I finally understood what Maya had been trying to tell me. The silence felt different now, not peaceful but empty. The photos on the mantel seemed to mock me with their forced smiles and false promises. I stood in the foyer, still wearing my anniversary dress, and let the weight of the evening settle on my shoulders. 5 years of marriage. 7 months of betrayal. One moment that changed everything. But as I climbed the stairs to what used to be our bedroom, I felt something unexpected stirring in my chest. Not despair. Not defeat. Bigger. Pure, crystalline anger that cleared away the fog of confusion and pain. Daniel thought he could humiliate me, discard me, replace me. He thought I would crumble, beg, fight for scraps of his attention. The weeks leading up to that anniversary dinner had been a masterclass in deception, though I was too blind to see it then. It started with small changes. Daniel began showering twice a day instead of once. His cologne switched from the woody scent I'd given him for Christmas to something sharper, more modern. He claimed it was professional image maintenance when I mentioned it. His phone, once carelessly left on counters and nightstands, became surgically attached to his hand. He carried it to the bathroom, kept it face down during dinner, and I caught him smiling at messages he never shared with me. "Work stuff," he'd say when I glanced over. "Boring legal documents." The late nights multiplied. The law firm, he claimed, was handling several high-profile cases that required his personal attention. He'd come home after midnight, smelling like perfume and wine, claiming he'd been schmoozing clients at expensive restaurants. "You wouldn't enjoy those stuffy business dinners anyway, Brittany. All shop talk and politics." I believed him because I wanted to, because the alternative was too painful to consider. Our physical relationship, already strained by years of scheduled intimacy around my fertility treatments, dwindled to nothing. When I tried to initiate contact, he'd claim exhaustion, stress, the need to keep his energy focused on these important cases. Once things settled down at work, he'd promise, then roll away from me in our king-sized bed. Mrs. Grant's visits increased. She'd appear at our door unannounced, sweeping past me with barely a greeting to demand updates on our progress toward giving her a grandchild. She'd eye my flat stomach with poorly concealed disappointment and make cutting remarks about women who prioritize careers over family. "Daniel needs a son to carry on the Grant legacy," she told me one afternoon while I served her tea in our living room. "Every month that passes is another month wasted." I wanted to scream that it wasn't by choice, that I was doing everything possible, that her son was the one pulling away. Instead, I smiled and offered her more sugar for her tea. The anniversary dinner was Daniel's idea. He suggested we celebrate at Le Bernardin, the upscale French restaurant where we'd had our first date. He wanted to invite both our families, our closest friends. Let's make it a real celebration, he said. 5 years deserve something special. I was thrilled. I saw it as a recommitment, a fresh start. I bought a new dress, booked a hair appointment, spent hours choosing the perfect gift. A vintage watch I'd found at an estate sale that reminded me of one his grandfather wore in old photos. The morning of our anniversary, Daniel was unusually tender. He brought me coffee in bed, kissed my forehead, told me I looked beautiful in my silk pajamas. For a moment, I glimpsed the man I'd fallen in love with. Tonight will be special, he promised. I have something important to share with everyone. I thought he was planning to announce our plans for adoption, the option we'd discussed but never committed to. Or maybe he'd finally agreed to the more aggressive fertility treatments I'd been researching. I spent the afternoon getting ready, feeling hopeful for the first time in months. Maya came over to help me with my makeup and hair, chattering about her new job and asking about my latest architectural project. You seem different today, she observed, applying mascara to my lashes with careful precision. Happier. Daniel and I are going to make some changes, I told her. Fresh start. She paused, the mascara wand hovering near my face. Brittany, can I ask you something? Have you noticed anything different about Daniel lately? My stomach clenched, but I forced a smile. Different how? I don't know. He just seemed. I can't put my finger on it. When I saw him at the courthouse last week, he was with that secretary of his and they looked. Maya, please. I interrupted. Not today. Today is about celebrating our marriage. She bit her lip but didn't press further. She finished my makeup in silence while I mentally rehearsed the gracious speech I'd give when Daniel made his announcement about our future. At the restaurant, I felt beautiful and confident. The dress fit perfectly, my hair caught the candlelight just right, and Daniel held my hand as we greeted our guests. Our parents were there, my sister with her husband, Maya, and her boyfriend, several couples from our social circle. Mrs. Grant presided over the head table like a queen holding court. My own mother looked nervous but hopeful. Everyone seemed to sense that something significant was about to happen. We ordered wine, shared appetizers, laughed at familiar stories. Daniel gave a charming toast about marriage, commitment, and the future. I felt tears of gratitude prick my eyes. Then he stood up again. Actually, I have one more announcement to make. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to him. I smiled up at my husband, my heart full of love and anticipation. That's when my world exploded. Lydia is 7 months pregnant with my child. The rest happened in slow motion. Lydia rising from a table I hadn't even noticed she was at, her hand protectively cradling her obvious bump. The gasps from our family and friends. Mrs. Grant's nod of approval. My mother's sharp intake of breath. Maya's whispered, "Oh my God." And Daniel looking directly at me with something that might have been regret but felt more like relief. It's not my fault Brittany can't give us children. A man needs an heir. I've waited long enough. The champagne glass fell. The world tilted. And something inside me, some last vestige of the trusting, hopeful woman I'd been, died a quiet death. But from its ashes, something else was born. Something harder. Something that would not be dismissed, discarded, or destroyed. As I walked out of that restaurant, I was already planning my next move. I drove home through streets that looked different now, as if the very geography of my life had shifted. Every familiar landmark. The coffee shop where Daniel and I had our Sunday morning ritual, the park where we talked about our future children, the bookstore where he'd bought me poetry collections, now felt like evidence of my own foolishness. The house was dark when I pulled into our driveway. Our driveway. I laughed bitterly at the pronoun. It was my driveway, my house, my mortgage. Daniel's name wasn't on any of the paperwork. Inside, I kicked off my heels and walked barefoot through rooms that suddenly felt foreign. The photos of our happy moments seemed to mock me from every surface. Our wedding portrait above the fireplace showed a woman I barely recognized. Hopeful, radiant, utterly convinced she knew the man standing beside her. I poured myself a glass of wine, the expensive bottle Daniel had been saving for a special occasion. Tonight seemed special enough. My phone buzzed constantly. Text after text from friends and family who'd witnessed the devastation. I ignored them all except Maya's. "I'm coming over. Don't answer the door for anyone else." She arrived 20 minutes later with ice cream, tissues, and a bottle of tequila. But when she saw my face, she stopped short. "Brittany, you look angry," I finished. "I look angry. Because I am." She set down her supplies and studied me carefully. "Good. Anger is better than despair. Anger gets things done." We sat in my kitchen, the one I'd renovated myself with custom cabinets and hand-selected tile, and I told her everything I'd been too proud to admit. The distance, the lies, the growing coldness. The fertility treatments I'd paid for alone. The house I'd bought, the life I'd built, the career I'd sacrificed time and energy to while Daniel coasted on his family name. 7 months, I said, my voice steady despite the fury burning in my chest. "She's 7 months pregnant, Maya. That means this started before my last round of treatments. While I was pumping my body full of hormones and hope, he was screwing his secretary." Maya's jaw tightened. "What are you going to do?" That was the question, wasn't it? What was I going to do? I thought about the old Brittany, the one who would have waited up for Daniel to come home, who would have begged for an explanation, who would have fought to save a marriage that was already dead. "I'm going to pack," I said quietly. But first I was going to do something else. I went to Daniel's home office, the one I designed for him in the converted sunroom with built-in shelves and perfect lighting. His computer was still on, password unprotected, because who would suspect sweet, trusting Brittany of snooping? I found the evidence within minutes. Email chains with Lydia that dated back over a year. Photos on his phone that made my stomach turn. Bank records showing expensive gifts I'd never received, restaurant charges for meals I'd never eaten, hotel bookings for weekends when he'd claimed to be at legal conferences. I screenshot everything, forwarded it all to my personal email, and copied the files to a flash drive Maya had found in his desk drawer. "Brittany," Maya whispered, watching me work with mechanical precision. "Are you okay?" "I'm perfect," I said, and meant it. For the first time in months, I felt clear-headed and in control. The packing came next. Not everything, that would tip him off. Just essentials. Clothes, personal documents, family photos, the jewelry that had belonged to my grandmother. I moved through our bedroom like a surgeon, efficient and emotionless. In his dresser drawer, under a stack of golf shirts, I found more evidence. A jewelry receipt for a necklace I'd never seen. Love notes written in Lydia's looping handwriting. A positive pregnancy test with a date that confirmed my worst suspicions. I photographed it all. Maya helped me load everything into my car. "Where will you go?" "My sister's for tonight. Tomorrow I have work to do." We stood in the driveway looking back at the house that had been my dream home. I thought I might cry, but my eyes stayed dry. "He has no idea what's coming, does he?" Maya asked. I smiled, and it felt like putting on armor. None at all. I drove away at 2 a.m., leaving behind 5 years of marriage and taking with me something much more valuable: the truth. Daniel returned home around 4 a.m., probably expecting to find me curled up in bed, ready to listen to whatever explanation he'd prepared. Instead, he found an empty house and a life that was about to become much more complicated. But I was already 3 steps ahead. I woke up in my sister Carmen's guest room feeling more rested than I had in months. The morning light streaming through unfamiliar curtains should have felt disorienting, but instead it felt like freedom. Carmen knocked softly on the door with coffee and concern etched on her face. "How are you holding up?" "Better than expected," I said, accepting the mug gratefully. "I need to borrow your computer this morning. I have some research to do." "Brittany, you don't have to figure everything out today. Take time to process." "I've been processing for months without realizing it," I interrupted. "Now it's time to act." My phone showed 37 missed calls from Daniel. I deleted them without listening to a single voicemail. By 8 a.m. I was dressed in my sharpest business suit and sitting at Carmen's dining table with my laptop, a legal pad, and the flash drive containing all of Daniel's digital infidelity. First I called in sick to work. Then I called Margaret Winters, the most ruthless divorce attorney in the city. Her reputation preceded her. She'd taken down 3 state senators and a federal judge in high-profile divorce cases. If you wanted your assets protected and your dignity intact, Margaret was your woman. "Mrs. Grant," her crisp voice came through the phone. "I heard about last night. The whole city's talking about it." My cheeks burned, but I kept my voice level. "Then you know why I'm calling. I can see you this afternoon. Bring everything you have." Next, I called my financial advisor. Daniel might have thought our separate accounts protected him, but I'd been the primary breadwinner for the last 3 years while his law firm struggled. Every shared asset we'd accumulated had been purchased with my money, my credit, my collateral. Sandra, I need a complete audit of all my accounts and assets. Something's happened and I need to know exactly where I stand financially. Brittany, is everything okay? It will be. By noon I had a complete picture. The house was mine. Deed in my name only, mortgage payments from my account, down payment from my trust fund. Our joint savings account held mostly my contributions. The vacation property in the mountains had been purchased entirely with my architectural firm's bonus from last year. Daniel had been living a rich lifestyle on my dime while building a secret life with his pregnant secretary. The irony was almost amusing. At 2 p.m. I sat across from Margaret Winters in her intimidating downtown office. She was exactly what I'd expected. Silver-haired, sharp-eyed, wearing a power suit that cost more than most people's rent. "Let me see what we're working with," she said. I handed over the flash drive, printouts of financial records, and a timeline I'd constructed of Daniel's affair. Margaret reviewed everything with the focused intensity of a prosecutor building a case. "Interesting," she murmured after 20 minutes. "Your husband made several significant mistakes. Such as? Well, for starters, he's been using marital funds you contributed, to finance his affair. Hotels, gifts, dinners. That's dissipation of assets and courts don't look kindly on it." She clicked through more files. "He's also been communicating about the pregnancy on company time using company equipment. If his law firm has any ethics clauses in their partnership agreement." The smile that crossed her face was predatory. "Mrs. Grant, I think we can work something out that will be very satisfactory for you." We spent 2 hours crafting strategy. Margaret would file for divorce immediately, citing adultery with evidence. We'd demand full restitution for dissipated assets, spousal support based on the lifestyle I'd been maintaining, and a clean break that left me with everything I'd brought to the marriage. "What about his inheritance? His family money?" I asked. "Never commingled with marital assets according to these records. He kept that separate, probably his mother's influence. But that works in our favor. He has no claim to your assets either." As I prepared to leave, Margaret asked, "Are you sure you want to move this quickly? Some people prefer to try mediation first, work things out amicably." I thought about Daniel's smug face as he'd announced his pregnant secretary. I thought about his mother calling me barren. I thought about all those nights I'd lain awake wondering what was wrong with me, while he was creating a family with someone else. "No," I said firmly. "No mediation. I want him served with papers before he realizes what's happening. He'll be served tomorrow morning at his office. Very public, very professional. His colleagues will certainly take notice." Perfect. I drove home to Carmen's feeling lighter than I had in years. My phone continued to buzz with Daniel's increasingly frantic calls, but I had Maya screen them. "He wants to explain everything," Maya reported with audible disgust. "He says it's all a misunderstanding, that he loves you, that you need to come home so you can work this out." "What did you tell him?" "That you'd be in touch through your attorney." That evening I allowed myself 1 glass of wine and a long bath while I planned the next phase. Daniel thought he'd checkmated me with his public humiliation. He had no idea that he'd actually handed me every weapon I needed to destroy him. By morning his comfortable life would begin to unravel. And I would be there to watch every thread come loose. The process server found Daniel at 9:15 a.m. in the lobby of Santiago, Katz and Associates, surrounded by colleagues grabbing their morning coffee. I know because Margaret's investigator sent me a photo. Daniel's face in that moment was everything I'd hoped for: shock, confusion, and dawning horror as he realized what he was holding. Petition for divorce. Cause: adultery. Supporting evidence: attached. By 10 a.m. his desperate calls had turned into visits. He showed up at Carmen's house, pounding on the door, shouting my name. Carmen called the police while I watched from the upstairs window as officers explained that I wasn't required to speak to him. "Brittany," he shouted as they escorted him back to his car. "This is insane. I was thinking we could do this amicably. Lydia couldn't move in and we'll all live happily. We can work this out. Think about what you're throwing away." What I was throwing away. The audacity was breathtaking. Margaret called at 11 a.m. with delicious news. His law firm just contacted me. Apparently, your husband's personal drama is reflecting poorly on their professional reputation. They're suggesting he might want to consider a leave of absence. I wasn't surprised. Santiago, Katz and Associates built their reputation on family values and moral integrity. Having a partner publicly exposed for cheating on his wife with a pregnant secretary wasn't exactly on brand. There's more, Margaret continued. I had our investigator do some digging into his finances. Your husband has been far less successful at his practice than he's led you to believe. His partnership draw last year was less than half what he claimed. The lies just kept coming. By afternoon, the social media fallout had begun. Someone at the restaurant had live-tweeted the anniversary dinner drama. The video was grainy and the audio poor, but you could clearly see Daniel's announcement and my dignified exit. The comments were overwhelmingly supportive of me. Queen behavior. She handled that with such grace. That man is trash, but she's a warrior. Maya forwarded me the best ones while I worked on my next move. I called my boss, Richard Santiago from Santiago and Associates. I'd been avoiding work calls, but Richard deserved an explanation from me directly. Brittany, I heard what happened. Take whatever time you need. Actually, Richard, I was hoping I could come in tomorrow. I have a project proposal I'd like to discuss. There was surprise in his voice. Are you sure you're ready? More ready than I've been in years. That evening, I drove to the house for the first time since the anniversary. Daniel's car was in the driveway and lights were on throughout. I sat in my car for a moment, gathering strength, then walked up to my own front door. He opened it before I could knock, looking haggard and desperate. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his hair disheveled, his eyes red-rimmed. Brittany, thank God. We need to talk. This has all been blown out of proportion. I stepped past him into the foyer, noting how different the house felt now. What had once been a sanctuary now felt like a museum of dead dreams. You're right, I said calmly. We do need to talk. But first, I need some of my things. He followed me upstairs, talking rapidly. The baby, it wasn't planned. It just happened. I never meant to let it out that way. I was going to tell you privately. It was out of excitement. When? I asked, pulling clothes from our shared closet. After she gave birth? After you married her? When exactly were you planning to mention your secret family? Brittany, please. You have to understand. I turned to face him, and whatever he saw in my expression made him step backward. I understand perfectly, Daniel. You decided I wasn't enough. You decided our marriage wasn't worth fighting for. You decided to humiliate me in front of everyone we know rather than have an honest conversation. It wasn't like that. What was it like? Explain it to me. Explain how you justified lying to me for 7 months. Explain how you justified spending my money on your affair. Explain how you justified letting me blame myself for our problems while you were creating a child with someone else. He had no answer for that. I continued packing while he stood there watching. When I was done, I turned to face him one more time. I'll be back for the rest of my things this weekend. I assume you'll be moved out by then. Moved out? Brittany, this is my house too. Actually, it's not. Check the deed. Check the mortgage. Check who's been making the payments for 5 years. The color drained from his face. You can't be serious. We can work out an agreement. We are working out an agreement. Through our attorneys. I'll see you in court, Daniel. I walked out of that house and didn't look back. Later that night, Margaret called with more news. His attorney wants to discuss settlement terms. Apparently, Daniel is eager to resolve this quietly. How eager? Eager enough to accept responsibility for the dissipated assets. Eager enough to waive any claim to the house. Eager enough to agree to a very reasonable spousal support arrangement. I smiled in the darkness of Carmen's guest room. And what about his job? Funny you should ask. His firm officially placed him on administrative leave this afternoon. Something about maintaining professional standards during personal difficulties. Daniel's carefully constructed life was collapsing exactly as I'd hoped. But I wasn't done yet. There was still one more chess piece to move. 3 weeks later, I walked into the offices of Santiago and Associates feeling like a different person. The scared, questioning woman who'd left for her anniversary dinner was gone, replaced by someone who knew exactly what she wanted and how to get it. Richard Santiago greeted me in his corner office with genuine warmth and concern. We'd worked together for 5 years and he'd watched me grow from a promising junior architect to one of their most successful designers. Brittany, you look. He paused, searching for words. You look strong. I feel strong. Richard, I have a proposition for you. I spread out the portfolio I'd been working on for 3 weeks. Architectural plans, business projections, market analysis. Everything I needed to pitch the idea that had been forming since that first night at Carmen's. I want to start my own firm, specializing in residential architecture for single women and families. Divorced women, widows, single mothers. Women who are building new lives and need homes that reflect their independence and strength. Richard studied the documents with growing interest. This is impressive work, Brittany. But starting your own firm is a massive undertaking. The capital requirements alone. I have the capital. And I have something else. A partner who brings complementary skills and shared vision. I texted Maya, who was waiting in the lobby. She joined us in Richard's office, her own portfolio in hand. Maya Rowan, interior designer, she introduced herself. Brittany and I want to create something revolutionary, architectural design and interior planning that empowers women to create spaces that truly belong to them. We spent 2 hours presenting our vision. Homes designed around the reality of women's lives rather than outdated assumptions about nuclear families. Flexible spaces that could adapt as circumstances changed. Beautiful, functional design that didn't require a man's approval or presence to feel complete. We already have our first 3 clients, I told Richard. Women who heard about my situation and reached out directly. They want what we're offering. Richard leaned back in his chair, considering. This firm has been very good to you, Brittany. I'd hate to lose you to competition. That's why I'm here. I don't want to compete with Santiago and Associates. I want to partner with you. Refer clients who fit our specialty, collaborate on projects that benefit from both approaches. A mutually beneficial relationship. By the end of the meeting, we had a handshake agreement and a timeline for my transition to independence. Walking out of that office, I felt the final pieces of my new life clicking into place. That afternoon brought even better news. Margaret called with update from Daniel's increasingly frantic legal team. He's agreed to all our terms, she reported with satisfaction. Full restitution for dissipated assets, a generous spousal support package for 2 years, and a clean break on all property division. He's also agreed to pay your legal fees. What's the catch? No catch. He's desperate to finalize this before his family finds out how much money he's spent on the affair. Apparently, his mother controls most of the family trust, and she's not pleased with recent developments. The irony was delicious. Mrs. Grant, who'd been so concerned about my ability to produce grandchildren, was now dealing with a grandchild born from adultery and a son who'd destroyed his marriage and career in the process. There's one more thing, Margaret added. Lydia, the secretary, has apparently been pressuring Daniel about marriage. Now that you're out of the picture, she expects him to make good on whatever promises he made. Problem is, he can't afford to support a wife and child on his diminished income. The house of cards was collapsing beautifully. 3 months later, the divorce was final. I kept the house, received a substantial settlement, and walked away from my marriage with more financial security than I'd entered it with. Daniel, meanwhile, had been let go from his law firm, due to restructuring. He'd moved in with Lydia, who discovered that being pregnant and unmarried to an unemployed lawyer wasn't quite the fairy tale she'd imagined. I heard through mutual friends that Mrs. Grant had cut off Daniel's access to the family money until he sorted out his personal disasters. The woman who'd called me barren was now refusing to acknowledge her own grandchild born from adultery. Maya and I officially launched our firm, Renovate and Reclaim, Architecture for New Beginnings, 6 months after that anniversary dinner. Our client list grew through word of mouth and social media. Women who were rebuilding their lives wanted spaces designed by someone who understood that journey. 1 year later, I stood in the living room of the house that was finally, completely mine. Maya was helping me hang artwork, pieces I'd chosen myself without consulting anyone else's taste or approval. Do you ever think about him? Maya asked as we positioned the abstract painting above the fireplace. I considered the question. Did I think about Daniel? About the man who'd promised to love me through everything, then discarded me when I couldn't give him what he wanted? I think about the lesson, I said finally. I think about how much stronger I am now. I think about all the women we're helping create spaces where they feel powerful and free. I think about how much better my life is now than it ever was when I was trying to be someone I wasn't. Maya smiled, understanding. No regrets. I looked around at the home I'd created. Truly created, not just decorated or maintained, but designed from the ground up to reflect who I was becoming rather than who I'd been told to be. Only one regret, I said. I wish I'd had the courage to leave him before he left me. But even that wasn't quite true. Because if I'd left him first, I might never have discovered how strong I could be when I stopped trying to hold together something that was already broken. 6 months after that, I ran into Daniel at a coffee shop downtown. He looked older, tired, wearing a suit that had seen better days. He was alone, checking his phone with the desperate attention of someone waiting for good news that wasn't coming. He saw me and immediately stood, nearly knocking over his chair in his haste. "Brittany, you look incredible." I was wearing a dress I'd designed myself, something I'd started doing as a creative outlet, and I felt incredible. My business was thriving, my house was a sanctuary, and I woke up every morning excited about the day ahead. "Thank you," I said simply. "I've been thinking about calling you. I know I made mistakes." "Daniel, please don't." I kept my voice gentle but firm. "We're both in different places now." He looked around the coffee shop as if searching for the right words. "Lydia and I, it's complicated. The baby is beautiful, but..." He trailed off, then looked at me with something that might have been longing. "I think I understand now what I threw away." For a moment, I felt a flicker of the old compassion I'd once had for this man. But it passed quickly, replaced by something cleaner and stronger. "You didn't throw anything away, Daniel. You made a choice. And so did I. Brittany, I know I hurt you, but if there's any chance..." "There isn't." The words came out without hesitation or cruelty, just simple truth. "I'm not the woman who would take you back anymore. That woman died the night you announced your pregnant secretary at our anniversary dinner." His face crumpled slightly. "So that's it? 5 years of marriage mean nothing?" "They mean everything," I said quietly. "They taught me exactly what I don't want in my life." I turned to leave, then paused. "Daniel, I hope you figure out how to be happy. But you won't find happiness by trying to recreate what we had. That's over." Walking away from him felt like closing the final chapter of a book I'd already finished reading. 2 years after that anniversary dinner, I hosted my own celebration. Not a wedding anniversary, something better. The second anniversary of Renovate and Reclaim, the business Maya and I had built from nothing into one of the city's most sought-after architectural firms. The party was held in my backyard, the same backyard where I'd once dreamed of hosting children's birthday parties, now transformed into an elegant, entertaining space that reflected my actual life rather than my imagined one. 50 people came to celebrate. Clients whose homes we'd designed, colleagues from the industry, friends who'd supported me through the worst and best times of my life. Carmen was there with her family, my parents beaming with pride at what their daughter had accomplished. Maya stood up to give a toast, her wine glass catching the light from the string lights we'd hung through the oak trees. 2 years ago, Brittany came to me with an idea born from pain but built on strength. She wanted to create spaces where women could be wholly themselves, where independence wasn't just tolerated but celebrated. The crowd listened intently as Maya continued. "Today we've designed homes for 47 women starting new chapters. Divorced mothers creating safe havens for their children. Widows building spaces for new adventures. Young professionals buying their first homes with no one's approval but their own." She raised her glass toward me. "To Brittany, who showed all of us that sometimes the best revenge is simply living so well that your past becomes irrelevant." The applause was warm and genuine. As conversations resumed around me, I felt a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with proving anything to anyone else and everything to do with becoming who I was meant to be. Later that evening, after the last guest had gone home, I sat in my redesigned living room with a cup of tea and looked through the portfolio of our completed projects. Each home told a story of transformation, of women who'd decided to architect their own happiness. There was my own house, the Victorian I'd bought with Daniel but transformed into something entirely mine. Room by room, I'd redesigned it to reflect not the woman I'd been trying to be, but the woman I'd discovered I was. The kitchen where I'd once cooked elaborate meals hoping to impress a husband who barely noticed was now a bright, efficient space where I hosted friends and experimented with new recipes for my own pleasure. The bedroom where I'd once lain awake wondering what was wrong with me was now a sanctuary decorated in my favorite colors, filled with books I wanted to read and art that spoke to my soul. The office where Daniel had conducted his secret affair was now my design studio, where I created beautiful spaces for other women finding their way to independence. 3 years after the anniversary dinner, I got a phone call that surprised me. It was Mrs. Grant. "Brittany, dear, I hope you don't mind me calling." I minded very much, but curiosity kept me on the line. "What can I do for you, Mrs. Grant?" I wanted to apologize. Her voice was smaller than I remembered, less imperious. For what I said that night and for not seeing what my son was doing to you. I sat in stunned silence. Mrs. Grant apologizing was something I'd never imagined possible. "I raised Daniel to believe he was entitled to everything he wanted," she continued. "I thought if he could just have a son, a legacy, everything else would sort itself out. I was wrong." "What changed your mind?" There was a long pause. "Watching him these past few years. He's not happy, Brittany. He thought Lydia would give him what he wanted, but he's miserable. The baby is beautiful, but Daniel. He's bitter, angry, always complaining that nothing is the way he expected it to be." I found myself feeling something unexpected, not satisfaction but pity. For all of them. "He asks about you sometimes," Mrs. Grant said quietly. "Wonders if you ever think about him." "I wish him well," I said and meant it. "But that part of my life is over." "You were always too good for him," she said suddenly. "I see that now. You were building something real while he was just taking. I'm sorry it took me so long to understand." After we hung up, I sat with that conversation for a long time. There was closure in it, but more than that, there was confirmation that leaving had been the right choice. Not just for my happiness but for my growth. 5 years after that anniversary dinner that changed everything, I stood in the main gallery of the Contemporary Arts Center at the opening of an exhibition called Spaces of Transformation: Architecture as Empowerment. The exhibition featured photographs and models of homes Maya and I had designed, accompanied by stories from the women who lived in them. It was a celebration of both architectural innovation and personal reinvention. I wore a midnight blue dress of my own design and jewelry I'd bought for myself to celebrate our firm's 5th anniversary. My hair was shorter now, styled in a way that felt confident rather than conventionally pretty. I looked like what I'd become, a successful businesswoman who answered to no one but herself. The gallery was packed with admirers, clients, fellow architects, and journalists. Maya and I had been featured in several design magazines, and our work was being studied in architecture schools as an example of how design could serve social transformation. As I moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and discussing our projects, I caught sight of a familiar figure near the back of the gallery. Daniel stood by himself, studying a photograph of the house we'd once shared, now completely transformed into something that bore no resemblance to the space we'd occupied together. He looked older, carrying weight he hadn't had before. His suit was decent but not expensive. He looked like a man who'd settled into a life that was fine but not fulfilling. Our eyes met across the room. He raised his hand in a tentative wave, and I nodded politely before turning back to my conversation. Later, near the end of the evening, he approached me near the entrance. "Brittany." He seemed nervous, uncertain. "Congratulations on all this. It's really impressive." "Thank you." We stood in uncomfortable silence for a moment. Then he said, "I wanted you to know, I understand now. What I did to you, what I threw away. I see it clearly now." I looked at this man who'd once been my husband, who'd once been the center of my world, and felt nothing but distant sympathy. "I'm glad you've gained that perspective, Daniel. I hope it helps you be better in your current relationship." "Lydia and I." He shook his head. "It's not what I thought it would be. She's not you. No, she's not. And I'm not who I was when we were married. People change, Daniel. Sometimes they change into who they were always meant to be." He looked around at the gallery, at the evidence of everything I'd built since leaving him. "You're happy?" It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "I'm fulfilled. I'm doing work that matters to me with people I care about in a life I designed for myself. Yes, I'm happy. I made the biggest mistake of my life," he said quietly. "Losing you." I considered his words, feeling no triumph or vindication, just a kind of peaceful finality. Daniel, you didn't lose me. You chose something else over me. And that choice led both of us to where we needed to be. I couldn't have become this person, I gestured around the gallery, if I'd stayed in that marriage. So in a way I should thank you. He looked stricken. Brittany. I hope you find peace, I said gently. Real peace, not just regret about choices you can't unmake. But you won't find it by looking backward. Maya appeared at my side, having finished her conversation with a potential client. Ready to go celebrate properly? She asked, then noticed Daniel. Oh. Hello, Daniel. Maya. He nodded stiffly. You've done something remarkable here. Yes, we have, Maya said simply. Brittany, the car's ready when you are. I turned back to Daniel one final time. Take care of yourself. And take care of your family. That little boy deserves the best version of you. Brittany, wait. But I was already walking away, Maya beside me, toward the future I'd built with my own hands. In the car, Maya asked, how do you feel? Seeing him again. I thought about it as we drove through the city lights, past the buildings I'd helped design, toward the home I'd created for myself. Free, I said finally. I feel completely free. And I was free from the woman who'd once begged a disinterested man to love her. Free from the desperate need to be chosen by someone who didn't value what he had. Free from the small, scared life I'd been living before I learned that my worth wasn't determined by someone else's inability to see it. That night, I stood in my home office looking at the wall where I'd hung photos from the exhibition. Each image represented not just a beautiful space, but a woman who decided to stop waiting for permission to live her life on her own terms. I picked up my phone and scrolled through messages from clients, friends, colleagues, and women I'd never met who'd been inspired by our work. Each message was a reminder that my pain hadn't been wasted. It had been transformed into something that helped others transform their own lives. The woman who'd walked out of that anniversary dinner 5 years ago had been broken but not defeated. She'd taken that brokenness and forged it into strength, wisdom, and purpose. And the woman I'd become, successful, independent, genuinely happy, was someone that heartbroken wife could never have imagined becoming. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't hurting the person who hurt you. Sometimes it's becoming so magnificently yourself that their opinion becomes irrelevant. As I turned off the lights and headed upstairs to my peaceful bedroom in my beautiful house and my carefully crafted life, I realized that Daniel had given me something valuable after all, though not what he'd intended. He'd given me the gift of my own strength. And that was a gift I'd treasure for the rest of my life.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.